Fam Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Glonner
and Chris Ramos.
Tonight, we review our groundbreaking runs with Batman Year One and Spiderman Kravens Last Hunt.
Yes, one from DC Comics and one from Marvel Comics. But we're going to start here with Batman Year One.
Batman Year One is written by Frank Miller, illustrated by David Mazzucchelli, colorist Richmond Lewis, and Todd Klein.
So Batman Year One is what you've probably heard of this issue. You've probably heard of this run. It is traditionally thought of as a starting point for any Batman fan. So if you want to start reading Batman, usually you're like, where do I start in his 80 years of history? Some people will say start from 1939.
No.
Yeah. There's a lot that's happened in the early years, and then there's the later years, but something happened in between those at DC Comics. They took all of their characters and
had a crisis. Crisis on Infinite Earths. That happened around 85 to 86.
It was a huge deal at the time because DC Comics realized that most of their characters were so convoluted at that point that they started saying, oh, well, those characters that you knew from the 1940s and 1950s in real life, well, now we have other characters and we're going to move them to like Earth 2 and Earth 64 and Earth 400.
Yeah.
I mean, they just started making all these other Earths and just saying those are alternate stories and alternate timelines. And then Crisis on Infinite Earths, what was like the end of that? They just took all those Earths.
Yep. Destroyed them.
And now there's just one. So the one Earth that's left is the true DC Comics world where everything is happening.
Yes.
And that is where DC needed to reboot all their characters, sort of, they have the same characters. They just need to kind of rewrite their origins.
A little freshen up.
Yeah. Like Wonder Woman got a new origin. Superman kind of no one changed their origins, but they all had the same idea.
Yeah. A little revamping, a little modernizing. Batman was written in 1939 when issue number 1 came out. And so it's good to have a little bit of modernization of what can writers do today that they couldn't do or think of back then. So it's a little nice that the art style is to improve and get the point across of what was Batman's origin.
Yeah, so Crisis on Infinite Earths wraps up, and now DC decides to pull some uber talented people at the time. So
Star Strutters.
Yes. So Dennis O'Neil is the new editor at DC Comics, and he pulled in Frank Miller, who just before this had written Batman The Dark Knight Returns, which is another future story of Batman. It's sort of like his last story. It's sort of like how Batman ends.
Yes.
So that was what most people will look at as responsible for bringing Batman out of the campy's 1960s, out of Adam West Batman on TV, out of hokey, you're caught in quicksand and there's a giant mousetrap about to snap you. And so Frank Miller said, I'm done with all that. I'm going to write a story that shows Batman as the Dark Knight, the gritty fighter.
Yes.
The detective.
So we join in the story. We read we each had a hardcover edition of the story. Ramos has the deluxe hardcover, and I have just a original hardcover. The deluxe is slightly larger, but not by much. And I just have like the standard hard size cover. They both have about the same content.
Yeah. So there's not a huge amount of, this isn't a huge volume. The story itself originally ran like Batman's comics were just going on just as normal. And then on issue 404, they just came out with year one. Like it just jumped right in. So issues 404, 405, 406, and 407. So it's just 4 issues. All of a sudden, we're telling the origin of Batman. The first year he was Batman, year one. And then it went back to Batman.
Yep.
So it's just like, stop.
Business is over.
We're going to tell you
Normal.
about this, and we're going back to it.
Yep.
So it's only about 100 pages long, but Frank Miller does a lot in those 100 pages.
Yes.
Really establishes the
Clean
character.
slate. You still kind of have to have an idea of who Batman in concept is. He is a man in a cape, trying to fight crime and justice, and he's trying to find his own sense of justice.
Yeah, and Batman himself actually, they kind of rely on the reader to understand the kind of filling in the gaps. So like it's an origin story, but it's also they touch on Batman as a child and his parents being murdered in the alley. But they also don't really show like
we don't spend all that time in that alley.
Yeah, it's sort of like you get like, this is the origin. Okay, now we're back to
what's happening in
really
the story.
This story is about Jim Gordon and Bruce Wayne coming back to Gotham. Bruce is coming back as a trained detective, trained fighter. He's been traveling the world for years, learning ancient arts and learning sort of how he can wage his war on crime.
Yep.
So he made a vow, and now he's coming back to fulfill that. Jim Gordon is coming in from another department to be lieutenant and work in the Gotham Police Department. His wife came with him, and they're trying to start a new life in Gotham. But you can tell he's kind of like,
he has a child on the way.
Yep.
So
she's pregnant.
He's becoming a new father.
So he's not Commissioner Gordon yet. He is Lieutenant Gordon, and he's got to kind of see how the Gotham police force works, which right away you realize they're all corrupt.
Yes. And I guess I'll read the opening. So this is divided, like we said, into 4 issues. Issue 1 on the front page, it says, he will become the greatest crime fighter the world has ever known. It won't be easy. And so for Bruce Wayne, he kind of, and Jim Gordon, both main characters or co-main characters in the stories, they find out what really is going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, and what exactly they need to clean up.
Yes.
Because they both, a lot of people know Commissioner Gordon and they know Batman as fully fleshed out heroes. And in this story, it is kind of, I think it's popular because they're figuring it out. They're not like already super.
They don't know everything. They're literally learning as you read the story, which is pretty phenomenal. I mean, Jim Gordon still has some experience, being in the police, and he said he had some Green Beret training and some Army training, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not a new thing for him to deal with people and crime, but to deal with it the way Gotham does, it takes another approach.
And I just want to spend a moment, like we always do, about the artist. So David Mazzucchelli is familiar. Well, he was popular at the time in the 80s because him and Frank Miller had worked on Daredevil Born Again, which is a great, great, great story. Again, that just reinvented that character.
That was groundbreaking as well.
Reinvented the character of Daredevil, brought him back into the spotlight, showed people what he's fully capable of. That has to happen every once in a while. Like every decade, they have to take a character and say, okay, we're going to get some really talented writers and artists on this and just sort of bring them back to life. Born Again is great. So they teamed up again on Batman Year One, and the art style in this is probably not what you would expect if you are reading very modern comics.
Yep.
Modern comics have tons of detail and tons of colors and effects and Photoshop stuff. And this
digital.
Yeah, this doesn't, but
it's very flat without being, I guess, flat, but in a good sense.
Yeah.
You get some realism out of it. You get like when he's getting hit over the head, you can tell that hit hurt and it damaged him. And he's maybe he's got like a concussion. Action with minimal movement, but it shows a lot that's happening.
I like to, in this story, you'll see when you're reading it that Batman, um, at first it's just Bruce Wayne and he goes out and he's just trying to kind of get the feel of the
Yeah.
city, and he ends up like getting very beat up. So then he realizes he needs something more than just him.
Yep.
So when Bruce Wayne first comes back to Gotham, one thing that struck me right away is Bruce Wayne comes back to Gotham and just thinks, I'm Bruce Wayne. I'm just going to go start fighting crime. Well, once he loses, he then has to say, what do I need an edge, like what can I project? What can I become to fight crime? And that's when the bat flies through the window and he says, I will become a bat,
Yes.
I will use that symbol to instill fear in my foes. And then boom, he's Batman. Like, I like that he just jumps into that in the story. He doesn't show him like trying to sew together a costume.
No, I mean, the most you might get is like a training montage of like him breaking some bricks and kicking it down a tree because he can.
We're just used to like these modern movies, even where everyone's like taking time to like draw out their costume. And,
right.
Batman just starts relying on his training and his detective work. And he quickly finds out
and he doesn't have a Batmobile right away. He just has like a black car.
Yeah,
maybe a nicer black car. Maybe just a maybe not noticeable car, but it gets him around. It does what it needs to do.
Yeah, and it kind of brings him, like what it said earlier. Andrew had said it brings him into the modern age.
Yeah.
If you're going to write the very first year of Batman as if it was 1940, well, that doesn't really bring him into the modern age. This at least brings him into topics that are
relevant
at the time. Selina Kyle is,
yep. So I guess jumping in, like one of his first fights that he has to deal with, or one he's a boss or a crime lord he's trying to deal with, it's literally outside like a strip joint, I guess, or whatever, down a Las Vegas style, and he sees this girl and he's trying to save her, and the pimp's like, oh, I can't do that. I can't take her away, whatever. And he has the scar to like hide his face because he doesn't want people knowing he's Bruce Wayne. And he's not in costume. He's just he tries not to be Bruce Wayne without
being like Batman. Makeup and everything.
Yeah, he tries doing the makeup route first. And so I'm like, oh, okay. And and Selina Kyle like sees him, somebody's stirring up ruckus, and the pimps are going after him. And Bruce Wayne does show him, what's up, but he eventually gets ganged up on, and that's where he realizes like, oh, I have to go about this a little differently.
Yeah, and this is Selina Kyle pre-Catwoman.
Pre-Catwoman, yep. She's she has these notions of being a thief, and she likes rescuing like cats and animals and things like that, but she's not immersed into that yet.
Right. And for Batman to go out now as Batman, it is really, again, well written as far as what you would normally do if this was you.
Yeah.
What obstacles would you run into? And you see that he has some skills like in gadgets and little,
right.
He has his batarangs and he has things like, but nothing like a modern Batman.
Sure. And I guess a little off track, but I think it would be cool to like bring it up. I think when we talked about like Kill or Be Killed, this kind of reminds me of that, like the whole like going in the streets and fighting and without a costume on, and he's just trying to get his own, and
Well, and it's like, all right, so you're villains in Gotham City and you're used to just sort of roughing up people or just...
And these aren't villains that are like the Joker, Scarecrow, or any of these larger than life villains. They're just like a regular like pimp at a club.
Yeah.
Or a crime lord.
Like druggies and people with guns and stuff.
And so that kind of reminds me of that style, if you like any of that.
And Batman kind of uses that to his advantage because he is trained and he is skilled. So... he quickly starts getting the notice of the police department. And so he realizes that he's technically branded a vigilante.
Yes, very quickly.
Yeah. And people see that as someone's just roughing up the underground, making enemies of everyone from the top politician down to the basic crime lord.
Yep.
And the police department says, well, he's got to be stopped. Like this is our way. Like they realize Batman is not
Traditional.
a corrupt. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's not a corrupt cop, so they can't control him. And that's at first where the police department, the commissioner that's in charge, he doesn't like Batman only because he can't control him.
Right. He likes him for the press, though, of like, oh, he's cleaning up the streets,
Yes.
so we'll keep him around.
He'll take the statistics.
He'll take the press for it. But that's a good segue into what Commissioner Gordon is going through right now. He came as a good cop that
Lieutenant Gordon.
Yes,
He's trained. He's learning.
Yes. So yeah, Lieutenant Gordon. He's trained. He's a do-gooder. He plays by the rules. But he's a traditional cop for the most part, or a traditional detective.
You get the idea too that so he wants to do things by the book, right?
Yep.
Like
he has his own brand of justice a little bit, but he wants to instill it.
But he also has that Green Beret where he's like,
don't mess around.
Don't mess, and he will go that distance. He won't break the law, but he will go right up to it.
Yeah. So he all the time he does the, what was it? Not shadowing. He is the ride along with his partner.
Mm-hmm.
His partner, I forget what the partner. I think it's Flen.
Merkel.
Flass.
Oh,
Flass. Yeah. Yes. Flass is his partner, and he is very, like we talked about, like the commissioner's very like a crime lord, very they take payoffs and bribes and things like that, kind of a mobster style that they're running it. And Flass is part of this style. He is kind of like the money guy where he goes around shaking people for money for protection. And so Gordon's always like, what are you doing? You're not a cop, man. The cops don't take a bribe. Why are we doing it? Why are we dirty cops?
And I don't think that's just from Gordon coming from some other precinct. I think that's just Gordon saying we have to still uphold what it is to be a cop.
Yes.
Because that's always been his MO, even in Batman, the Killing Joke, where the Joker tries to break him. It's still like, we are cops and we're doing things.
Yep. You'll live and die by it.
Right. This is our oath.
Yes.
And it's good to see that at least shown in this early origin story. And then, of course, Batman just can't get around the police department. So there is a great scene where the police department just corner him in an abandoned building. And he has to like escape.
Right. That's jumping a little ahead, but definitely like Batman's always is getting challenged by new heights and everything. And, they're always kind of pushing the limits. And even when he's in that burning building and he's cornered and everything, and he is, when they drop the bomb on the building, and, he can't use his utility belt because it has explosives in there that are just burning up. So he has to get rid of that.
Yeah.
And
that's right.
He's like, okay, I'm just going back to basics. I got what's ever in my gloves right now, and in my maybe he's got something stored away in his boots, and that's about it. And his own ingenuity. So,
and he toughness. Has he does show some of the really unique items he has. So there's a famous scene in the Batman movie with Christian Bale where he calls the bats in with the sonar.
Oh, yep.
So
you think you got it from this?
That is exactly where this came from. Yeah, the ultrasonic tone.
Okay.
And because it's like almost the exact same scene where he has to escape. And so he does this ultrasonic on his heel of his boot. And he even says, he's trained these bats for weeks and now they will come to this call. But Wayne Manor is quite a drive away. So all these bats
he said, I got to wait like 10 minutes.
Yeah, so he knew like he switched on the sonar.
Yeah.
And he knew the ultrasonic tone is going to call them, but he had to buy himself some time,
right,
and not hurt the cops. Like he didn't want to just go
not deliberately. Yeah, for sure. So and even Gordon, He's kind of, he's getting challenged by Batman because he's trying to catch him, but he's like, this guy is not a usual criminal or even a vigilante. He's doing it way differently. Um, he has to deal. Gordon also has to deal with like the wealth at power that try to control the cops. Every angle, like both these characters are getting challenged and trying to meet those challenges.
Yeah, they find out that every angle that they come at is there's layers and layers and layers of it. Like this is a deep-seated problem with
A
Gotham
lot of
City.
corruption.
Yep. And corruption isn't just a matter of removing the person in power. You have to find the true source and you have to change the mindset of the people. And that's what Gordon still thinks he's going to do is, change the public perception of Gotham and the police. Um, if he has to work with Batman while he's doing it, he wasn't too happy at first. He thought, no, Batman's got to go. I mean, he was
Yeah.
with that.
It was until like there's this big car accident that happens while Gordon's driving, and this I guess you would a big truck, like a delivery truck, just runs right into him. And as it's gonna happen, there's this little old lady, out, getting her groceries, or like she might be homeless at the time, but he's like, oh, I can't hit her. So my detective, my partner that's in this car, this lady, she's going to grab the wheel of my car. I'm going to go jump on the delivery truck and try to steer him out of the way. Well, that doesn't happen as timely as he wanted it to be. So Batman comes up, saves the lady, the homeless person, and gets him out of the way. And everybody comes out okay for the most part. The day is saved, but he's like, whoa, okay. And the detective that was driving the car originally, that lady detective, she's like, freeze. And he's like, oh, just forget it.
See, and I like too that Batman is Bruce Wayne. So he's starting to realize what an alter ego, a secret identity,
Yes.
not alternate ego, but
Yeah.
But he's beginning to understand what a secret identity needs to stay valid, because there are scenes where Gordon is calling Gotham or calling Wayne Manor and saying, hey, is Bruce Wayne there? And Alfred's like, oh, he's out skiing in the Alps and he broke his leg, so it'll be a while. And Gordon thought Batman got shot the day before in his leg, and then here Bruce Wayne has a broken leg, and so he's trying to
put the dots together.
Yeah, he's trying to. But Bruce Wayne and Batman are trying to figure out how can they both be, coexist.
Yes.
And how can they cover each other's tracks?
Right. Him trying to play the playboy, and he's drunk and everything, and like it was a little afternoon or something like that. He's like, oh,
he starts putting that together.
Yeah. That was kind of cool to see, like things like that. And just the building scene where they get charged in and he has to face off against the SWAT was like brilliant.
Yeah. And so there's great moments of action, there's great moments of
character development.
I think the character development was great. Really thinking about how can they piece together all of these different characters and make them the people that everyone recognizes now.
Right.
See, you have to remember he's writing year one, but he's bringing the characters in that have already had 50 years of story behind them. So
this is where it could go.
Yeah. So Frank Miller is like, all right, I'm going to bring in the characters you love as an audience. So, Selena Kyle is in there, Catwoman's there, Gordon's there.
And Harvey Dent.
Harvey Dent is in there.
Yeah, the beginnings of Harvey Dent are in here.
Yeah, and Jim Gordon is spending more time with the sergeant at his work, and she and him are starting to have a little bit of an affair. And so it was a huge dive at the time for Frank Miller to say, these are the characters by the way, number 1, Catwoman's a prostitute. Number 2, Gordon is cheating on his wife. Number 3, Batman is trying to stumble his way through town and
become the legend.
And I think some people thought, my gosh, this is not the story that we thought you would be writing. We thought we'd be having this impervious Batman being perfect from the beginning.
No,
No.
far from it. Far from it. And they do eventually learn to become partners in each other. Batman and Gordon, they do, and it's cool to see that, as each of them, work through their struggles of finding out, how to become a hero, how to do good, how to clean up the city, to eventually work together, and hopefully in the future come
Yeah.
to agreement at least.
Yeah. And so, as the story is progressing, I mean, I do want to take a step back and just say that, oh, and Alfred's in here, of course,
Oh
but
yes, yep.
uh, but I want to take a step back and just say, if someone is looking at starting a Batman run, there's always sort of this disjointed collector's feel of, do I collect pre-crisis or post-crisis? And that's exactly what happened with most of the DC characters, right? Like, people who liked Aquaman before the crisis, or people who liked Wonder Woman before the crisis, they had to sort of readjust um, their fandom into what is their character now. And this story, in my minds, and I'm a huge Batman fan, and actually I am really close to collecting just about everything post crisis Batman. I'm I'm getting close. Someday I will announce that I have made it. But there's just a lot to track down. There's a lot of stories out there. There's a lot of great talent, and Batman, it has always been known for having multiple titles out.
Yep.
Detective Comics was
Comics,
running, Batman was
Batman,
running. Then they had, Legend of the Batman and Tales of the Dark Knight, and
yeah.
so Batman, after this story and after the Dark Knight Returns, which was like a year or two before this, became super popular, like mega popular.
Yep.
And then, of course, Batman, the Michael Keaton movie came out in 1989. So that just, again, catapulted his character
Sure.
way out of there. I always tell the story that in 1989, I went and saw Batman by myself when I was 10 years old, because at that time I was such a big Batman fan, and I didn't get to read year one until much later. And I didn't get to really track down a lot of those Batman stories. And now, when you're reading it correctly, as this is Prime, Batman Prime #1, it really makes a big difference. So that's my plug. If you are starting Batman as a big fan, find this volume, find this story, and we want to at least drive you towards the best collected editions of these pivotal, groundbreaking issues,
Yes.
groundbreaking runs.
And this is also in a movie now. They made an animated movie.
Oh yeah.
A little while ago now, but there is a Batman Year One that is very good. Definitely captures most of the story that's going on. But I do, and I think we both would recommend maybe starting with this book and then watching the movie. You can definitely get more of the gritty details and the voices for the characters, and kind of understanding like the emotional like depth that's going on.
Yeah, because every character here starts already sort of grown up. Is that a good way to say it? Like they're already like the middle of their career, right? So you're not really trying to piece together any backgrounds, and you're not really trying to figure out, how did Batman make his utility belt? That's just not important in the story. They're not, break down every little piece of it.
Yeah.
Catwoman really,
She by the time year
grows.
one is done, she does get her costume,
Yes.
and she does start becoming a thief. She's not super interested in Batman, but she knows who he is, and maybe kind of hints of like where this could go in the future.
And it is funny because Frank Miller he takes the time to sort of show her how she became Catwoman, and
Yep.
that she wants to be a cat burglar,
Yeah,
and
kind of inspired by seeing Batman and kind of seeing what could happen.
and she kind of puts it together herself.
Yeah.
And then Batman and her have that right away interesting little back and forth of like she's she's a criminal and he doesn't want to be seen as a criminal, but he also sees her motives, but he also sees, I don't know, her attraction. So,
Yeah.
he's not exactly dragging her to the police department.
Sure. And then I guess real cool fun facts, that are going on during this. Gordon has his own like lettering, and Batman Bruce Wayne has his own lettering as well. You can
Oh
kind
yeah,
of
good point.
tell the different,
point.
like it sets the characters apart from each other, and when you're reading them, so you definitely have different voices. I'm not used to reading cursive, so I'm like holding up. I'm like, okay, that's that word, mansion. Okay,
Yeah.
so that was kind of fun to re-examine that. I haven't seen that in too many other stories, so that was kind of a cool fun fact for you.
There's a few tropes in here that Frank Miller is really known for, and I think the cursive is one of them. He's really into like putting a lot of voices in the comic. So
Hmm.
he's always writing like what the people are thinking,
Yep,
or
different
even,
colors to the thought bubbles too. I think
yeah.
that happens.
And even if he's just generally narrating like what's happening in a scene, it's always like a from someone's viewpoint.
Yep,
He rarely kind of gets into, it's raining outside and the moonlight is this and this, the streets is that. He always puts it in someone's thought bubble. So you're literally living the story through the character in the page, which is a really good way to do it,
yes,
because it feels like you are um, like sort of watching in on them, or like you're this omniscient narrator yourself. So you're like, I know what this person is thinking,
yeah,
instead of having someone explain the scene to you. Right.
yeah. So yeah, this is a very cool, gritty, it's not super dark story, but is it definitely a little more mature of a story. It's starting to get out of that campiness, and that Batman kind of starts taking itself seriously and becoming more of a detective comic. And these are the early beginnings of that. Frank Miller wanted to address those.
Yeah. And, a lot of the Batmans that I enjoy reading are the ones that show him as a detective, as a calculating, he's analyzing the situation and he's doing his research and he's, on his computer and he's putting together pieces of puzzles.
And he
That's
can
the
do kung
Batman.
fu.
Yeah. Yeah.
He can do kung fu.
And then when he figures out the puzzle, then he goes and he chops everyone up and he beats them up. But it is cool to have a story that's pieced together slowly. And there's a lot in these 4 issues. It's hard to believe it's just 4 issues, but I mean, they used every square inch of this page to tell their story. And it's a great, great, complete story. It's one and done. And when you read this, I think you'll have a better idea of Batman, and you'll have a better respect for Batman um, starting off in his first year as the crime fighter. So stick around. We're going to be coming at you with the next one, which is a groundbreaking run from Marvel Comics, Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt.
Stay tuned.
All right, we're back with Spider-Man, Kraven's Last Hunt.
Yes, this, I think, to my knowledge, this is one of the darkest Spider-Man stories I've ever read, and I really appreciate it. I really enjoy the story.
It's totally true. This story is something else for Spider-Man fans.
Yes.
Uh,
I'll just take a second, I guess, to read the little excerpt from the dust jacket. The way I'm feeling now, it could take me all night to break free. I've been in worse shape before. I know his method. He's just like Dr. Octopus and the Vulture and all the rest of them. He'll pack me off of some secret hideout, spend a couple hours ranting and raving, and while he does, I'll find a way to beat his smirking face right into the look at his eyes. There's something in his eyes. This isn't Kraven, I know. He's out of his. Bam!
yeah.
That sets the tone for the story.
It's a great setup. And, Kraven is a traditional, like original Spider-Man villain. I just looked it up. Kraven came out in 1964. He
Yep.
first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 15. So Spider-Man had been around for a while, like 2 years.
It was in that first Spider-Man omnibus reviewed.
There you go. That was our number one. And Kraven actually was just one of the
Hokey
lineup
villain,
of villains.
He was definitely different than all the rest. He had his quirk about animals and using them in different ways to combat Spider-Man.
Yep. And his shtick, his little villain shtick was that he was the ultimate hunter. He
Yes.
had conquered every animal in the entire world and no one could defeat him. And then he found out about Spider-Man, a man that was half spider, and he said, I will defeat him too. And then he couldn't. So for years and years and years, Kraven would show up in the comics, battle Spider-Man, just like that foreword said. And Spider-Man would think in his head, oh, I gotta
Here he comes
we go.
again. Oh boy, here we go.
He's gonna capture me and he's gonna,
Give a
smirk
spiel.
at me, and then I'll have to beat him up and be free. Well, this story turns that idea on its head right away. The first page.
Yes. I am Kraven, the beast. My mind is rage and glory. My heart is fire and pride. My body is grace and power. I am Krav, the
man and the old man. So the story here is Kraven has been hunting and fighting for years, and he's realizing that he's past his prime. Like time has passed, and he's like, I'm no longer at my peak. So the only thing that I can do left in my life
to bring me satisfaction and happiness.
Something. The one thing I've never been able to do, because he kind of even goes through that he was like from Russia
and his repressed childhood.
Yep.
That he kind of had
nobility and all that stuff.
Kind of had to get all this Cold War sense of mentality, and he kind of still is a Cold War mess.
Yeah, and like for fun, he's wrestling. What is he?
Wrestling
wrestling giant gorilla and stuff.
Yeah.
So he finally says, and the tone in this comic, this is why it's a pivotal run. This is why it's a key issue.
A groundbreaking run.
Yeah, groundbreaking run, because the tone in this is set automatically as something is different than other Spider-Man stories. I mean, right away, the reader is like, something's different. The coloring is darker. The character brooding is different. He's saying, if I do anything right now, is I'm going to kill Spider-Man. Like it's just straight off. And it's not like I'm going to take over the world. It is just something snapped in Kraven, and he says, one thing I'm going to do before I die.
Because I am going to battle and I'm going to defeat Spider-Man. And so the character does just that. He has this obsession with Spider-Man. It kind of takes it to that new level of, I want to defeat and kill Spider-Man. I want to become more than that. I want to be Spider-Man.
Yeah. And then it kind of cuts over to Spider-Man himself. And, Spider-Man actually is in his black costume.
Yes. Not the symbiote costume.
Yeah, that was like a year before, right?
Yeah, that was like a couple years prior to that, when Venom and Spider-Man, they were kind of tussling back and forth. The symbiote the alien symbiote that came from this planet. He met with Spider-Man. They kind of coexisted with each other. And then Spider-Man, figured out, it's kind of taking over my personality. I don't want to be part of that anymore. They separated. And then the symbiote found Eddie Brock and became Venom. Later on, some time has passed, and, Spider-Man, he just recently got married. And when this run's happening, and his friend Nate, what's the Nate?
Oh my gosh, what is his name?
So Spider-Man's best friend, he dies during this run, or at least right before this run occurred. And he kind of regrets not being there or doing anything about when his friend died. So he has this remorse and regrets about not being able to be there. Ned Leeds. There you go.
Yeah.
That's it. As I talk through this, Ned Leeds. Yes.
Same character that was in the Spider-Man movie.
Yes. So he has this big regret over, not being there. He's still trying to put a settling down with Mary Jane in their new home and new life.
So some parts of Peter Parker and Spider-Man are still the same.
Yes.
Peter Parker has always been this brooding, like world-crushing debt and responsibility, and now he decided to just keep that black costume because it just reflects his mood
at the time. Yes, it's a great reflection of what he feels right now.
So that is just another stark appearance of what Spider-Man is. People, once he took away that red and blue costume, you can't help but to look at this on the page of just, it's jet black, like full inked black with some blue outlines so you can at least tell where his arms are. But
I do like this version of the costume, though.
Yeah. And then a huge white,
the
spider wrapped all the way around his rib cage and into his back. Yeah. And it just makes for a menacing Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. And, even when he tries to pay respects to Ned Leeds, at his funeral and, or at least maybe not, it's not his funeral, but another mobster's like funeral that he died, the mobsters around him are like, "Oh, you're going to come get us and everything." He's like, "No, I don't want to come get you. I don't want to fight you. I don't want to hurt you. I just want to pay respect to my friend."
Yeah.
That's it.
And so you see that he's not really like rubbing elbows with criminals and underground, but he's just becoming a more thoughtful character.
Yes.
Spider-Man, when he first started, was very
would have probably
instinctual,
instant, he's not willing to get, his first thing is not to get pictures or make money.
Yeah.
It's just to literally,
and he just dove into every fight, like literally head first.
Yes.
And now he's just
kind of settling in. He's grown up. He's matured. He's finding out who he is.
So the story is written so that it's setting up Spider-Man and Peter Parker as this is where they are in their life, and now Peter Parker's happy to settle down with his new wife, Mary Jane. But then on the flip side, Kraven is every panel going crazier and crazier.
Yes.
And so he decides the only way for Kraven to sort of get his strength and get his powers is he first of all like eats a bunch of herbs and crazy plants and things, and that's what gives him his super strength. Mm-hmm. And that's always been the case, but then he decides to defeat the spider.
To become the spider.
He has to become the spider.
And so the writer of the story, DeMatteis, and penciler, Mike Zeck, and inker Bob McLeod, and the rest of the team, they want to give that sense of like the fear and what Kraven is kind of going through his head, that if he wants to become the spider, he is literally diving into a pit, or seemingly a pit of spiders, and eating spiders, and and kind of just becoming this rapid, like it almost looks like rabies is coming, but from like eating all these spiders and
just living that sort of primal.
Yes, those primal instincts are overtaking him. And he has to get ready for this epic fight of his life.
And so the artwork goes back and forth as almost it starts out page by page by page, right? So one page is Kraven, one page is Spider-Man, one page is Kraven, and then it starts going panel, panel, panel. Like literally the pages now are being broken up. Spider-Man, next one, Kraven, Spider-Man, Kraven,
and as the two kind of slowly meet together.
You see this happening where it's and there's like bugs crawling on the wall, and like this story is really into noticing like the creepy details.
Yes.
And it's really showing like Peter Parker's sleeping and there's a spider coming down the wall, And
Yeah.
even Peter Parker is like, oh, hey, Spider. So you kind of get
And
the
I guess before we go
idea.
too far, this story is mostly told through narration.
Yeah, like they don't really talk a
It's a
lot.
very heavily used device, a storytelling device.
You're right. There's not many
Dialogue.
speech bubbles.
Yes. Which is kind of a unique, storytelling device that, a lot of comics don't use, or at least today they don't use, or maybe they're getting out of, he didn't want it to be so dialogue heavy, but yet he wanted to go, instead of people talking to each other, like there's a lot of monologue
Yeah, yeah.
of
Like
what the
there's actual
characters are, their
stories.
thoughts and feelings are, which also kind of added to the creepiness and the dark nature of the story, I think.
Yeah, that's true because Craven.
You kind of learn about his desires and that primal urge. And
He always was a driven villain, but in this one you see that he is now. Um, I mean, the driven is one part. Now he is just
obsessed.
obsessed.
You get to
Yeah,
learn
it's
about
great,
that.
great word. Yeah, because he has no other way to prove himself for his legacy, for his family, for his history, and that's exactly what he wants to do. He sees himself as, if I'm going to be the ultimate man, the ultimate
Yeah.
fighter, then
The ultimate
this
hunter.
has to be
Yeah.
done.
Mhm.
So I was surprised he captures Spider-Man. Hits him with a dart, and then
Yes, the super, poison that's also mixed with drugs that's laced to like kill an elephant, put an elephant
yeah,
out, just the way he did, he packed it full. And he shot him with this dart, where he could have shot him with a gun.
yeah, I was like, that's enough for Spidey. And then for the past, half an issue or the full issue, someone's been digging a grave every other panel, and now you finally find out it's a grave for Spider-Man, and
Yes.
they toss
Yes.
him in.
Yep. And it was cool. I love the panel sequence of how after he gets hit by the dart, that he thinks he's seeing Ned Leeds as a ghost. And
Yeah,
then the ghost turns out to be Kraven as he puts him in. Right.
so then Craven, and here's another interesting part, as that was like the first issue. It's a 6-part series, Kravens Last Hunt, and they decided at the time to go ahead and do it in every, like there were 3 Spider-Man titles, so they said let's just spread it out. We're going to put it in every Spider-Man title. Um, it kind of gets tricky when you do that in comics because you throw out the normal continuity, and the normal writers who are working on this, they say, oh, by the way, we're going to throw this 6-part issue.
Graphic novel, short graphic novel.
Yeah, it's an important story, so just put a pause on your storyline, and then it can go back later on. So the first one was in hold on. Yeah, the first one was in Web of Spider-Man, and then the second issue here now appears in The Amazing Spider-Man number
Okay.
293.
Yeah.
And then when that's done, then they go back and they put the third issue in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man, which is another run they were doing.
Yep.
And then they go back again for the fourth issue in Web of Spider-Man. So they
Sure.
kind of started jumping around, and at the time it sort of forced people to collect across the runs. So it's not really a crossover where they're jumping from one team book to the next, but it was just showing that Spider-Man was pretty well read at the time. It had three titles running, and they were all doing well enough that they could support a title like this. So the next issue, of course, after Spider-Man is put down by Kraven, is
He's literally buried.
yeah,
Like literally, there's a casket. He's in there.
all the dirt's on top.
And literally, Kraven sees this as, I've killed him. I've won.
Yeah.
I am the better person.
Made a tombstone. Here lies Spider-Man, slain by the hunter. That's what the tombstone says.
Yeah, and it's a very menacing, grim moment. J.D. DeMatteis definitely wanted to make that, be really important.
Yeah, and then Kraven
That's never really been seen, I don't think. Or at least that imagery hasn't been seen, I don't think, prior leading up to it.
No. So here, funny story. When this came out, there was no lead up to this. There was no warning. There was no trailer. There's no, secret, or there's no um, uh, other comic that sort of let off a little idea. This literally just came out. Kraven said, I have to kill Spider-Man. By the end of the issue, he does, and he buries him. And fans across the country were like, they just killed Spider-Man, like legit killed Spider-Man, no doubt. I was one of them when I first read.
You heard it here, folks.
Yes, when I first read this, I was like, "What happened?" I mean, they just decided we're gonna kill Spider-Man, and boom, done. And I, you know, it. The '80s was a really interesting place because even movies like Ghostbusters and stuff. Ghostbusters never showed any part of the movie. Their trailer was just literally like the ghost with the big
Yep.
X through it, and then people were like, "What the heck is this?" So they really left that suspense part of it, which is great because nowadays I feel like they have to show everything, and then half of
Yeah.
it gets like spoiled. So this was like a no spoiler comic. Like,
Yeah,
boom,
I suppose when it's coming out,
yeah,
at
boom,
first time.
Spider-Man's dead.
Yeah, like,
And then you're like, wait, I'll get the next issue. Well, you can't get the next issue because it's going to be pick up in this other run.
right.
But Kraven starts the next comic in Spider-Man's costume,
Yes.
and he is like, I am Spider-Man now.
Yeah. So we were talking about that obsession. Well, he takes it to fruition, and he puts on the costume. It looks a little bigger on him, and he probably had some
It's a-
alterations done. But he wants to prove to Spider-Man that he is a better Spider-Man than he ever was.
Yeah, so he decides that he's going to run around the city and just be Spider-Man
Yeah.
and just do what he does. And this is another story. There's a lot that have come out since then, but this is another story of just how difficult it is to become Spider-Man.
Yes.
It's quite the endeavor to just one thing is to put on the costume. Fine. The second part is, how do you actually put up with being Spider-Man?
Right. And while that's happening, we learn because you have to fight somebody, right? You can't just fight Kraven. I suppose you could,
Yeah.
but in the background, he develops this character called Vermin. Vermin lives in the sewer, and he is essentially a rat man. I would call it.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
He's kind of this. He kind of has all the characteristics of it, except he's kind of super strong, or at least above a normal human strong. We'll say that. And earlier, whenever this character first came about, it took both Spider-Man and Captain America to fight him and to defeat him. So this story kind of takes the premise of, we need a character that Spider-Man couldn't defeat on his own, but maybe Kraven could fight him and become the best and prove that he's better.
Yeah, so they were building him up as this sort of side villain story, and they, do a good job of flipping back and forth. Now you've got Vermin, now you've got Kraven, then you've got Mary Jane. What does Mary Jane do when Peter Parker doesn't come home?
Yes, and it entertains that conversation of,
Yeah.
what if Peter never comes home?
And she thinks this is
right.
it.
She
This
thinks
is the final
this
night.
is, he's just going out and coming back from his job, coming back from taking pictures. It's raining out, whatever, just another day. And that feeling, if you get that idea in your head of something you forgot to do, or something you have an idea in your head, and that just kind of gnaws at you, and it takes over. And she gets freaked out, and so she tries goes looking for Spider-Man.
She goes for a walk and is immediately
rain.
set upon by
Gangs and
muggers.
and then Vermin comes after her and things like that. So.
And
Kraven does too.
Yeah, Kraven shows up in Spider-Man's costume, starts just brutalizing these robbers, these intended robbers.
Yes.
And Mary Jane immediately says, even though it's in Spider-Man's costume, she immediately says, this is not Spider-Man.
Right.
So she knows that something is wrong. And I think she picked up on the brutality of Kraven.
Yeah.
And he just sets
yeah,
upon
because
these
she's
guys.
like, that can't be Peter. No way.
There's no way that he's going to be. And, the thing that Kraven also lacks is Spider-Man's webs. So he has to
Yes.
just bust in
And
everything and
fists.
just
Fists.
fists and kicks
And yep.
and he just jumps right into however many people he wants because he feels like he's untouchable now. He has reached peak hunter,
Yes.
the hunter, and
Right.
so as the story is progressing, Kraven starts becoming sort of a bigger villain in the story, not because he's attacking any of the main characters, but because they're putting him in situations where he has a chance to show his true colors, like he's abducting people. And so you get the idea right away, like, okay, he is actually a very big threat,
Right.
villain threat.
And so eventually Peter does come back. Spoilers.
Spoiler, he's okay.
He's okay.
Sorta. He's really
he
pissed.
comes back out of his drug coma, and that he's pissed. And we find out Spider-Man has been out for Peter Parker. Spider-Man has been out for 2 weeks.
Yeah.
So literally, you have an
and
imposter.
that like enrages him.
Yeah, and he's like, somebody's been masquerading on me and corrupting my life. And be trying to be me for 2 weeks. That's a lot of time for people to screw up me.
And he was thinking too, he just kept saying Mary Jane,
Yeah.
Now she has bbeen living without him for 2 weeks.
Yes.
And he sees that as Kraven took that
piece of his
away
life
from him.
Yes.
He's they just got married. So, they took that 2 weeks away from him. And I think it's great that this story doesn't mention, Dr. Octopus, and doesn't mention Peter Parker's job at the Bugle.
Yeah.
It doesn't really get into all of the other parts of his life. It just focuses on Kraven, him
this evolution of
becoming the hunter, and also being okay with how much torture he's putting Peter Parker through.
Yes. And so this, I think one of the main premises of this story, of this book, is fear and how different characters approach fear. Kraven, he wants to become fear and kind of conquer his own fears of Spider-Man, beating Spider-Man, becoming Spider-Man, and
fear of dying,
fear of dying,
fear of not being at his alpha game.
Yes. Peter Parker, he is in fear of losing himself, losing to somebody else, somebody like trying to be Spider-Man, his identity that he created, fear of missing out on his life with Mary Jane. Vermin, he is trying to come out of the shadows and be a person, but he's fear of the outside world is always craving in on him.
Yeah. So he's always hiding in the sewers.
Mary Jane kind of like fearing that somebody else will become Peter and become Spider-Man.
Or just fear that he's never coming home. And so now
that's what the main theme of this book is. And that's such a dark, insane way to approach Spider-Man.
Yeah.
This happy, like go quippy character, which he has a few quips in this book, but they're very dark humor.
not really that. And the greatest part of each page is, you're right, there's all this thoughts, narration,
Yes.
People going from one sentence to one thought to the dark thought, and then back to reality, and then switching to a different character right when you think, okay, what's the real answer here? Mary Jane is finally coming to grips here. Then they switch. Boom. Now it goes to Kraven.
Yes.
A really great job making sure that you get the idea that Peter Parker is totally driven as Spider-Man. Like, he is Spider-Man, and there's no way he's not going to be Spider-Man, because he could have come back, another way. He could have come back, saw that someone else is being Spider-Man, and just said, woo, I don't have to do that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, I
can just be Peter Parker.
Yeah. So if you want to handle Spider-Man, go ahead,
Yeah.
Kraven. I'm going to go live a different life with Mary Jane. But immediately you see that,
because he took ownership and being that identity.
yeah, he is Spider-Man. He's like, this.
He kind of
is
learns that he can't take that identity for granted.
Yeah. Even from being home, he came back to Mary Jane and she says, just stay. And he says, I'm going. I have to stop him.
Mhm.
I mean, that's always been Spider-Man's story. He has to stop I have to stop them. If
Yes.
I don't, who else will?
Exactly. So then kind of Kraven, finally, he him and Spider-Man duke it out, realizing who is Spider-Man, why he's Spider-Man, and why he could never truly own up to that title. And so Kraven, he's like, I did the thing. I got Spider-Man to conquer his fears. I helped him become a greater hunter. I did all I can. And so he decides to sunset himself.
Yeah, that's a good way to say it.
Yep.
And Craven, realizes that he lived that life. He doesn't have to be Spider-Man for 30 years.
Yep.
He just had to do it. And he had to show himself that he could. I think he realized it was a lot tougher than he thought.
Hmm.
I think he also realized that he doesn't want to um, kill Spider-Man. He just wanted to show that he was
You
better
better
than
than
him. And that
him.
doesn't always mean
Yes.
killing. It just means
Yes.
like, I have bested you. I have
Yes.
defeated you.
Yep.
You are totally broken and I am taking over. And that doesn't always mean killing.
Yeah.
So Craven did a, good idea there, I guess.
You're right. It was definitely for a villain to come and do that in the world of Spider-Man. That was so huge and groundbreaking at the time.
Yeah.
Nobody else have did that or come close to it.
And I guess I can't help but to overemphasize when you're reading a comic, there are writers and artists and storylines where, you know, people say death in comics is superficial. Like, okay, character died or a building fell down on top of them, and you're like, well, they're totally dead there. You just kind of know later on that that's not right. I think Marvel has tried to kill Iron Man millions, like they've killed Captain America. They've killed, there's so many characters and they've come back. And Spider-Man at the time that this was written and when this came out in the late 80s, 86, 87, he hadn't died.
Yeah.
And so for that to happen, I mean, the one person in comics that has always stayed dead was Uncle Ben.
Yep.
And that holds true even to this day. So when readers of Spider-Man since the 60s have always understood Uncle Ben died and he stayed dead. When Spider-Man died, people were like, if Uncle Ben stayed dead, how can Spider-Man come back? Like
Yeah.
it was really something. And like you said, to have Kraven then at the end of this too,
Yeah.
it was a lot for a 6-issue series. It's
Yeah. It
just
was
6
very
issues.
emotional. You feel for both sides of these characters, and you're definitely in it
Yeah.
for sure. It's very intense.
I love this story. And, I think that this is a real key run for anyone who is a Spider-Man fan. But I do want to put in a little 2 words here. Don't make this your first Spider-Man read. If
No.
you've never read Spider-Man before, don't jump into this because there's a lot of backstory that is maybe not for everybody.
Mhm.
There's the black costume. There's Kraven himself. There's Mary Jane and Peter Parker, and
Yep.
there's Vermin, and there's just a lot of backstory and that you have to kind of build up a love for the characters before you get into this.
Yeah, a very great appreciation for who Spider-Man is and what he stands for, at least. And then if you understand that, yeah, I would say it's a very mature run. Don't let young kids read this. But it is very good. I recommend it.
Yeah, and it's again just a little mini episodes we're doing right now, which is the groundbreaking runs that are put together as 4 issues, 6 issues, maybe 10 issues, 12 issues. But every once in a while, Marvel and DC break the norm. They bring a story right up to the front that's just an amazing, amazing read, and it sort of reinvigorates you for the character. After this, when Spider-Man was back, people are like, Spider-Man's back, like
Yeah,
it does nothing but to help the character.
sure. Kind of, it changes the status quo, but not at the same time.
Yeah. Like there's really no harm, no foul a little bit, except that you realize that Spidey can go pretty deep and dark and he can put up with a lot, but there is a point where he's just like, I've had enough,
Yeah.
like Like you
Push
are
him to his breaking point.
Yeah.
Literal breaking point.
you are villains. I am trying to do good, but there is a line where you just cannot cross that, and usually it has something to do with Mary Jane and just trying to psychologically break him down.
Yep.
I think is a big part.
Yeah.
But the artwork perfectly matches the story.
Yes.
Amazing run.
Agreed. This has been Bam Pow Comic Hour with your hosts, Andrew Launer
And Chris Ramos, thank you for
Signing
joining
off.
us. Goodbye.